Good evening. This is Channel 1 Television News. Russia is taking its first steps in foreign policy, and its first activities are giving it a reputation as a power promoting peace. Today, Russian President Boris Yeltsin left on a 10-day foreign visit. His route is London, New York, Washington, then back to Moscow and Paris. Before his departure for London, the Russian president told the press that the missiles have been re-aimed away from U.S. cities and that the U.S. is no longer considered the main enemy. However, rapid disarmament does not remove the threat of war. Many issues remain, which were discussed at the meeting between Yeltsin and British Prime Minister John Major. The report from London will be shown later. Now we show New York, where Boris Yeltsin will speak to the UN Security Council tomorrow. Soon, for the first time in history, the leader of Russia will take his place at this table. Boris Yeltsin will make more further radical proposals for reducing strategic nuclear weapons, many people expect, and Russia is prepared for this. But what will be in the president's briefcase, this will be shown by the negotiations and the course of the meeting. The local press has already determined his presentation as historic. The Security Council has never met at such a high level before. So the question remains, what place will Russia take in this changing world now that the map of the Soviet Union has been changed in the Security Council chamber? According to the White House press service, Russian president will be asked to explain his position in foreign policy now that Russia has no more enemies. This new entity, the Commonwealth of Independent States, is not understood by many people in the West, so he will be asked to explain the political and economic situation in the CIS. And there is the question of disarmament, which will also be discussed. As a journalist, I can say that Yeltsin's proposals are extremely important, especially as they come on the eve of this top-level meeting. So the question arises, will this meeting produce productive results? There are proposals for radical cuts in nuclear arms proposed by Yeltsin and Bush. Will this become the basis for productive work at the discussion of the Security Council? Yeltsin will arrive in New York tomorrow. He arrived in London today. The Russian President Boris Yeltsin arrived at Heathrow Airport in London today along with his entourage. He was met by a member of the cabinet, Finance Minister of Britain Lamont, and the Deputy Head of State Protocol, Mr. Figes. Among the meeting party were also the Russian ambassador to London, Boris Pankin, and the English ambassador to Russia, Mr. Braithwaite, and other officials. John Major invited the Russian president into his office, where they will hold their negotiations. After the conclusion of this meeting, the Russian and English negotiations were continued with the full negotiating teams. They were held in a friendly and businesslike atmosphere, and one of their main results was the signing of a joint declaration. This important document will provide that both sides are opening a new page in relations between them. It was signed by Russian President Yeltsin and the Prime Minister of Great Britain. Many journalists who were waiting all day outside the house of the Prime Minister waited for the final press conference, which was held at 10 Downing Street by Major and Yeltsin. Highly evaluating the steps taken by Russia for nuclear disarmament, the English Premier expressed Britain's intention to assist Russian democratic development and support its membership in the International Monetary Fund. This year, Russia will receive export credits in the amount of £280 million. After this, Boris Yeltsin spoke to those gathered there. He said, in part, Russia and the Russians are not only the ones interested in the success of reform in Russia. The entire world community, including Great Britain, is also interested in this, and so we are grateful to the Prime Minister for his understanding and support of reform in Russia. Russia will never forget the help and support received in the Russian Federation. Strikes and social tensions have a deleterious effect on the future of the Russian nation. Today, the birth rate has fallen to a critical level. Being born is just as difficult today as it was 100 years ago, but becoming a parent is becoming more difficult. And seeing that things are not getting better in this area as well, we are beginning not to do it. The birth rate was 140,000 newborns short of the expected level. The death rate has now overtaken the birth rate in our country. Many people say that this is a demographic effect of the Second World War. The smaller generation born in the 60s is now producing a second smaller generation itself. But this is an optimistic approach. Fewer women are giving birth, but they're also having fewer children. It was very difficult to decide to have a second baby. Do you want a third child? No. Why not? Because it's too difficult to live now. I just want two, a boy and a girl. But we need at least three. The increase in prices in the stores, wild rumors about increased prices for kindergarten places are having an effect on the production of the fruits of loves. But now there's one more new phenomenon. We have birth hospitals where you will have to pay for full service about 3,000 rubles. And if a woman can't afford to pay, then she will give birth just as all the other people do. The first human instinct and the instinct of all animals has been for self-preservation. Humans also have the instinct to preserve the tribe. It seems that Russians are even losing their instincts now. Population growth is falling sharply, and we need extreme measures. We need a presidential decree which would guarantee a certain level of provisions for pregnant women, in particular for breastfeeding mothers and for children up to 3 years. It's a fact that children are sick more often if they are not caressed. What will happen to the adults if they have no one left to caress? News from the country's hotspots. Armenia and Azerbaijan are on the verge of war. The Uzarinform news agency reports that Azerbaijani President Mutalibov said at a special session of that country's National Security Council that Azerbaijan is meeting against a large and well-organized military force. He said that the military forces in the mountains of Nagorno-Karabakh are being supported with capital from the Armenian diaspora. The president added that this is not a peaceful population, but armed bandits. The only way to get to the city of Sushi now is by helicopter. And these craft often come under the fire, the real hunting of Armenian snipers. The latest victims were January 28th, when a helicopter reportedly carrying women and children was shot down. Many people in Sushi saw the rockets fly that brought down the aircraft. It is difficult to determine who exactly was on board. There were about 40 people said to be residents of the city of Shushi, but it was difficult to identify them because their remains were so badly burned. The city of Khankent came under heavy artillery fire today. These barrages are methodically destroying the city. It can be added that Shushi has a very strategic location. It's the shortest route to Armenia from Nagorno-Karabakh. So it's the victim of, it's at the center of the crisis. Armenia is in crisis. There is no heat, gas, or water. But these problems are nothing compared to those of our compatriots who live in Nagorno-Karabakh, where death has become as familiar as hunger. The Azerbaijani side is using former Soviet military technology, including rocket launchers and the famously destructive grenades, to continue the battle. People are living in basements for a long time. People are being born in the basements of maternity hospitals and in the basements of hospitals. Doctors are giving life back to the wounded. We're not talking about political issues here. We're talking about the lives of people. We appeal to the entire world society, to all people of goodwill, to come to the assistance of the Armenians of Nagorno-Karabakh. The Supreme Soviet of the Nagorno-Karabakh Republic and many international observers, including UN observers, have advocated the introduction of UN special forces to keep the peace here. The Azerbaijani side opposes the internationalization of this problem. It considers the genocide of the Armenian population to be its internal affair. And the last thing we wish to say about the shooting down of this Azerbaijani helicopter, the Republican newspapers say today that according to self-defense forces, the helicopter was occupied not by peaceful citizens, as the Azerbaijanis said, but by soldiers of the Azerbaijani National Army. Many witnesses say that at the moment the helicopter was hit by rockets, the people on board began to throw large